The sun was just beginning to rise over the Gulf of Mexico, casting a pale orange hue across the calm water. Fishing boats bobbed near the shoreline. Early workers moved around the marina, and seagulls cried out over the lapping tide. Everything felt peaceful, ordinary except for the sleek. A marked boat cutting quietly across the horizon, 40 feet long in jet black. The vessel looked like something built for high-speed evasion. No name on the hull, no flag, just two massive Mercury engines humming in near silence and a single woman at the helm. Eliza Kane stood behind the wheel, a dark ball cap pulled low over her forehead, aviator shades hiding her sharp gray eyes. Her jacket was weatherproof, tactical grade, zipped to the throat. She looked composed, almost bored, but every muscle in her body was alert, focused. She wasn't cruising for pleasure. She was en route to a rendezvous she hadn't asked for and wasn't planning to explain to anyone. 40 miles out from Key West, she changed heading, veering slightly off regulated shipping routes. That's what got the attention of the Coast Guard. Inside the radar room aboard Cutter 311, Seaman Eric Grant squinted at the blip on his screen. Unregistered vessel, high speed, shifting outside the safe lane. He muttered. His chief leaned over. Heading? Looks like 180, southbound. Could be nothing. Could be someone trying to stay off the maps. The chief picked up a headset. Get eyes on it. Alert boarding crew. Could be smugglers. The cutter turned. Eliza saw them coming before they saw her. Her radar system was more advanced than theirs, military grade, even though she technically wasn't in the military anymore. A slight smile touched her lips. She kept her course steady through binoculars. The Coast Guard team watched her draw closer. One operator frowned. Solo female pilot? Looks like it, someone said. Small crew, maybe she's got others. Below deck, they didn't know Eliza never traveled with backup. Anyone who tried to keep up usually got left behind or killed. Inside the cutter, Lieutenant Jackson Stone issued the standard protocol. Hail the vessel, identify, prepare for boarding if non-compliant. He wasn't expecting trouble. He had done hundreds of these stops. But he also hadn't expected a boat this clean to have no name, no number, no flag, and certainly no response. Eliza heard the warning message crackle through her external speakers. Unregistered vessel, this is the United States Coast Guard. You are operating in restricted waters. Cut your engines and prepare for boarding. She leaned into the mic, pressed the button, and spoke just 3 words. You first. Over. On the cutter, Stone stared at the speaker. Did she just say, you first? The crew laughed nervously. Let's bring her in, he said firmly. Playtime's over. The armed officers geared up and prepared to board. As they approached the black cruiser, they saw her standing upright, hands behind her back, watching them without concern. No panic, no confusion, just calm defiance. The younger officer, Morales, climbed aboard first. Ma'am, please step away from the controls. She nodded, took 2 steps back, and slowly unzipped her jacket. ID's in my chest pocket. You'll want to look closely. Morales kept his rifle down but ready. His partner, Chief Hammond, stepped beside him and reached into her jacket. He pulled out a worn leather wallet, standard government issue. He opened it. Everything changed in an instant. Morales peered over his shoulder. What the hell? Inside the wallet was a badge, golden, edged in black, with the unmistakable trident of naval special warfare. Below it, a laminated card with red markings. Hammond had never seen one in person, but he'd heard of it. Eliza Kane, Tier 1 operator. Clearance, Echo-9. Status, active special access program. The Coast Guard had just boarded a woman who outranked most people in the Pentagon on paper, at least. Lieutenant, Hammond called out into the radio. We've got a situation here. Eliza finally spoke. You're attempting to detain an operator currently engaged in a federal SAP mission. I suggest you step off my deck and contact someone above your pay grade. There was no aggression in her voice, only precision. She didn't blink. Morales slowly lowered his weapon. Back on the cutter, Lieutenant Stone's radio came to life. Sir, I think we need to make a call. Her ID says Naval Special Warfare, Tier 1, active clearance. Stone felt a chill down his spine. No way. He muttered. Out here. Alone? He took a breath and reached for the encrypted phone connected to district headquarters. Static. Then a beep. Seconds later, a voice came through. Calm, male, official. Lieutenant Stone. Stand down immediately. The vessel you have intercepted belongs to a federal asset operating under classified authority. You are not to engage, question, or follow. Acknowledge this order now." Stone stared at the speaker. "Who is this? Check the override code. On your secure pad. We'll wait." He looked at the blinking tablet on his desk. A red override had appeared. Clearance code. WRAITH-17. It was real. Stone pressed the talk button. "Acknowledged." Eliza watched as the two officers backed away slowly. "No harm meant." Morales mumbled. "None taken," she replied, already moving to restart her engines. Within moments, her cruiser pulled away, leaving the cutter dead. In the water, no chase, no questions. Just a hard lesson learned by a team that had no idea who they were dealing with. And Eliza. She wasn't done yet. Lieutenant Jackson Stone stood frozen in the control room of the cutter, staring at the override code on his tablet as if it might vanish if he blinked. His crew waited in silence, still unsure of what just happened. Moments ago, they were prepared to seize an unmarked vessel. Now, they were under a direct federal order to disengage from a woman they hadn't even fully identified. He replayed her name in his head, Eliza Kane. It rang faint bells from old classified briefings, the kind where phones were left outside the room and names were spoken only once. Tier 1 operator, Special Access Program, Echo 9 clearance. You didn't just get that badge. You were forged through a lifetime of missions no one could publicly acknowledge. Stone exhaled and stepped onto the deck. The black cruiser was already a speck in the distance, slicing through the water with terrifying speed and control. No trail, no sound. It moved like a ghost. "She didn't blink once," Morales muttered, still gripping the rail. "It was like she expected us, like she planned the whole thing." "She did," Chief Hammond replied grimly. "People like her, they don't move without knowing everything 5 steps ahead." Back in the control room, Stone closed the encrypted pad. No report, no names. This didn't happen. He looked around the room, understood. The men nodded. Meanwhile, Eliza Kane was 40 nautical miles away and gaining. The sun had fully risen, reflecting off her tinted windshield as she navigated toward a known smuggler's route. While the Coast Guard was still catching its breath, she was already prepping for the real mission. Below deck, she opened a secured case mounted into the floorboards. Inside were the satellite-linked tablets, each showing live feeds from underwater. Drones she had deployed a week earlier. The screen showed nothing out of place yet. Her sources had pointed to a shipment moving through this sector, linked to stolen military equipment. But this wasn't about the weapons. It was about who was behind them. Eliza tapped the encrypted keyboard and brought up a facial recognition profile. Cole Jensen, ex-SEAL, discharged under circumstances that had been quickly buried. Once one of their own, now a ghost selling secrets and geared to the highest bidder. Last ping was from a decommissioned oil platform in these waters. She closed the case and pulled out a dry-fit tactical wetsuit. The confrontation with the Coast Guard had been a delay she hadn't planned for, but it also confirmed something important. They hadn't known she was out here, which meant Jensen didn't either. That gave her the edge, at least for now. As she slipped into the wetsuit, her mind flashed back to Fallujah, the raid, the gunfire, the night their entire unit was ambushed because someone leaked coordinates. Jensen had been the only one to vanish clean, and somehow, months later, he was seen alive, deep in cartel territory. That kind of betrayal doesn't fade. She zipped up the wetsuit, checked the seals on her waterproof gear, and pulled out a small, black pouch. Inside was a folding dive knife, a sidearm in a sealed holster, and a miniature GPS transponder. She clipped the knife to her ankle and holstered the sidearm at her hip. She looked at the mirror in the corner of the cabin. Her reflection was calm, unreadable, the same way it had been in interrogation rooms, in desert caves, in jungle standoffs. She had trained herself to remain centered, but this time, there was something different. This mission wasn't sanctioned. She had no team, no support, and no extraction window. She wasn't here because of orders. She was here because of justice. Above deck, the water had shifted in hue as she approached a massive, rust-covered structure rising from the sea. The abandoned rig. Seabirds circled its corroded towers, and ropes swayed loosely in the wind. It hadn't pumped oil in over a decade, but it was perfect for off-the-books operations. No government oversight, no cameras, just isolation. She slowed her engine, dropped anchor a half-mile away, and activated a signal jammer. Any radar within range would think her boat simply vanished. Silently, she slipped over the side, The water was cold, but familiar. She moved with calculated precision, cutting through the depths with the smooth rhythm of a diver who had done this in war zones. 10 minutes later, she surfaced beneath one of the rig's lower platforms, where hanging metal ladders reached into the dark water. She listened. Voices above, male, laughing. She recognized one. Cole Jensen, that smug, gravel-throated voice she had once trusted on Black Ops radio. Her heart rate didn't rise. Her breath remained even. She reached into her pouch and removed a small fiber optic camera, feeding it up through the platform cracks. There were 4 men up there, all armed. Crates lined the floor marked U.S. ordnance, stolen. But Jensen wasn't just selling weapons. He was selling government secrets and hosting buyers offshore. Eliza pulled herself up the ladder silently, her wet gloves gripping rusted steel. She didn't need authorization. She didn't need permission. She was already in the fight. Eliza climbed the ladder slowly, controlling every movement to minimize noise. Her body knew what to do. Muscle memory took over. By the time she reached the platform's edge, she was already scanning for cover. A rusted fuel drum stood nearby, partially blocking view from the interior, where voices still echoed. The sun was climbing higher now, casting sharp shadows between the steel beams and scaffolding. Every footstep, every gust of wind could give her away. She crouched low behind the drum and removed a tiny scope from her pouch, peeking through the lens. She spotted them 4 men, just as her fiber cam had shown. 2 of them were clearly muscle, armed with AR-15s slung over their backs. The third was pacing, talking loudly into a satellite phone. The fourth was sitting in a folding chair, legs stretched, a smug look on his scarred face. Cole Jensen. He looked older than she remembered, more bulk, more ink on his arms, but the same arrogant posture. He leaned back, holding a Cuban cigar between his fingers, laughing into the wind. There was a scar under his right eye now, probably earned on some dirty job he'd never admit to. Eliza took a slow breath and began timing the guards' movements. One circled the crates while the other stood at the far end of the rig's platform, watching the open see-through binoculars. The pacing man seemed to be giving updates to someone, possibly a buyer inbound, or a lookout team nearby. There wasn't much time. She pulled out a small black pouch containing the smoke capsules, and a flashbang. She only needed to separate them, divide, and conquer. A direct firefight would alert nearby vessels, and this area was still patrolled lightly by air surveillance. If they called for backup, it would turn into a bloodbath. The flashbang would go first. She leaned forward, arm cocked, and let it fly. It bounced once, clinked against a steel pole, and went off with a blinding flash and concussive crack. The reaction was instant. The pacing man dropped to the floor, clutching his head. The 2 armed guards ducked, disoriented, raising their rifles in opposite directions. Jensen bolted upright, reaching for a pistol holstered under his vest. That was her moment. Eliza moved like lightning. She crossed the deck in a sprint, covering the distance before the first man even recovered his hearing. Her elbow cracked against the first guard's jaw, sending him stumbling backward into the rig railing. The second guard raised his weapon, but she slid into a low roll, came up behind him, and smashed the butt of her Glock into his temple. To down. The third man, the one who'd been pacing, was fumbling with his radio. She kicked it from his hand, drove her knee into his chest, and pinned him with her forearm. Jensen was backing away, pistol drawn. "Eliza," he said, spitting her name like a curse. "Didn't think you'd show up out here. Put the gun down," she ordered, standing tall. "You're alone. No agency behind you. No Black Hawk in the sky. What's your plan, really?" She didn't answer. He fired once, missed. The shot echoed across the water. She charged. They met near the center of the platform, the gun skittering across the metal floor. Jensen lunged at her, grabbing her by the vest. She broke free with a headbutt, then slammed her fist into his ribcage twice. He countered with a knee, caught her off balance, and drove her backward into a steel pole. Pain radiated through her spine, but she didn't stop. She twisted out of his grip, grabbed his collar, and flung him to the ground with a shoulder throw. He grunted, rolled, tried to reach for the gun, but she was faster. Her boot pinned his wrist. "You don't get to walk away this time," she said, breathing hard. He laughed through bloodied teeth. "You think taking me down changes anything? I'm just the surface. You have no idea how deep this goes." "I don't care how deep it goes," she said coldly. I only care about stopping it from going further. She zip-tied his hands behind his back and bound his ankles. His crew was unconscious or restrained. The entire rig was hers now. Eliza activated. Her emergency beacon coded and silent, transmitting a signal to a satellite channel known only to 2 agencies. No names, no spoken confirmation. Within minutes, someone would be inbound. As she waited, she began scanning the crates, serial numbers, inventory codes, GPS tags scratched out. It wasn't just American weapons, there were foreign explosives, encrypted devices, even SAT drives marked for nuclear command. Whatever Jensen had been dealing, it was no local operation. She opened one of the sealed crates and found a document case inside. Top Sheep, Operation Cedar Vale. Her eyes narrowed. The name wasn't familiar. That meant it was above her clearance level. That meant someone inside had authorized this. She heard the rotors before she saw the helicopter. No markings. All black. Exactly the way these extractions always happen. The rope dropped fast. The mast operators descended with precision, gave her a single nod, and began securing the prisoners in crates. No questions asked. One handed her a clean sat phone. A voice came through, calm, direct. Excellent work. Package secured. Secondary objective is active. Eliza wiped blood from her temple. What's the secondary? His partner. Honduras. You'll find him before sunset. The call ended. She looked at the man she once called a brother, now tied and bleeding at her feet. I'll find him, she whispered. Then she stepped onto the rope and vanished into the sky. The helicopter roared across the Gulf, the rhythmic chop of its blades lost beneath Eliza's thoughts. She sat near the open hatch, helmet in her lap, wind rushing past her. The operator across from her gave no eye contact, no words. That's how these teams work, clean, silent, surgical. But she wasn't just cargo. She wasn't just another field asset. She was the one they called when a name needed to disappear. Eliza pulled the sat phone from her jacket and opened the last transmission. GPS coordinates pulsed on the screen. Northern Honduras. Remote, mountainous, thick jungle cover. The location didn't match any known installation. That meant off books again. She studied the terrain, memorizing the elevation, access points, water routes. The more secluded it was, the more dangerous it became. She closed her eyes for a second and remembered a time long before the betrayals. Training in Virginia Beach. Cole Jensen had been her team lead. Smart, fast, ruthless when he needed to be, but loyal until something broke in him. She never saw the moment it happened, only the aftermath. An operation in Syria. A failed extraction, to teammates dead. He disappeared 3 days later. Files wiped. Surveillance lost. Now he was in custody, but not in prison. People like Jensen didn't end up in courtrooms. They ended up in black sites or graveyards. The helicopter began its descent toward a private airstrip in Belize, where a second team was waiting with ground transport. She stepped onto the tarmac, boots crunching on loose gravel. A man in a gray suit approached. No badge, no name. You're Kane, he asked. You know I am. He handed her a USB stick. Satellite images from 3 hours ago. Your target was spotted near this compound, he said, pointing at a grid on a printed map. We believe he's meeting with an arms broker named Yero Sanchez, former FARC, now free agent, Jensen's partner. He's more than that. He was the pipeline. Jensen stole from our stockpiles, but Sanchez made them vanish. We take him down. We collapsed the channel. Eliza nodded and slid the USB into her secure tablet. It opened with a retinal scan. The files were robbery photos, intercepted texts, movement patterns. One image caught her attention. A man standing next to Sanchez, face turned just enough to show a profile. Her heart stopped. It wasn't just a new contact. It was Paul Kruger. Another ghost. Kruger had been on her first deployment, a logistics tech, sharp as a razor, never in the field. But he knew every route, every drop zone, every time-sensitive window for Black Ops flights. 2 years ago, he'd faked a training accident and disappeared. No one had heard of him since. He wasn't muscle. He was the mind. If he was working with Sanchez now, this network went far deeper than she thought. Eliza checked her watch. She had less than 6 hours of daylight, enough to get close. Not enough for a full strike. She'd have to do recon herself. She climbed into the transport vehicle, an old Land Rover fitted with off-road tires and infrared sensors. The local asset sat up front, both ex-military, now contracted to silence. No questions were asked. They drove for hours, cutting through twisting jungle trails. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then thick sheets pounding the windshield. Eliza leaned against the doorframe, watching the canopy blur by. Her mind sharpened, going through what little she knew about the compound. Built from an abandoned mining outpost, retrofitted with solar and diesel generators. Rumors said it had a 12-man security team and at least armored vehicles, the kind of place built to survive a siege. But Eliza never knocked on the front door. When they arrived at the edge of a cliff, she stepped out into the rain, threw on her pack, and checked her gear. The driver handed her a drone no bigger than a soda can. She launched it silently, its camera feeding real-time visuals to her screen. The compound came into focus. Low buildings, dim lighting, perimeter patrols. In one of the outer courtyards, a black SUV idle. Beside it stood Sanchez and Kruger, speaking animatedly beneath a canopy. It was real. She could end this now, but she needed them alive. Eliza slipped back into the jungle, circling toward the compound's northern side where the terrain dipped into a ravine. She moved through wet foliage like a shadow, careful not to break branches or disturb wildlife. Her gloves soaked through. Her boots sank into mud. She moved faster. Half a mile out, she found her perch, a rocky ledge with a perfect view through a clearing. She unfolded a compact rifle from her case, fitted a suppressor, and watched through the scope. Kruger was walking alone now, headed toward a supply shed. Her finger rested near the trigger. One shot to wound, interrogate, extract, but something shifted. Another figure stepped out from behind the shed. Not Sanchez, not Kruger, a woman, tall, blonde, tactical posture. Eliza adjusted the scope. Her stomach dropped. She knew that face. Mara Voss, once CIA, now presumed dead after a botched raid in Tunisia. She'd been on Eliza's short list of possible moles, but no one ever confirmed her betrayal. Now she was standing next to Kruger, handing him a sealed black sack case. That changed everything. Eliza backed away from the scope, heart pounding. This wasn't just a smuggling ring. This was a rogue cell. Kruger, Sanchez, Voss, maybe even more. If they were pooling resources here, they weren't just planning deals, they were preparing for something bigger. And Eliza had just walked into it alone. She packed her rifle, activated her sat beacon, and whispered into her mic, "This is Wraith. I need shadow backup at grid 5-7. High priority. Do not go loud." Then she turned and vanished into the trees, rain swallowing her tracks. Eliza kept moving. The jungle swallowed the sound of her footsteps. Leaves dripping rain onto her hood as she slid down a muddy slope. Her heartbeat had settled, but her mind was racing. Voss was supposed to be dead. Kruger had vanished. Sanchez had operated for years under half a dozen aliases, but now all three were here, under the same roof. That wasn't coincidence. That was a network. She paused at a ridge, dropped to one knee, and unfolded her tablet again. The drone's feed had gone dark, jammed, or disabled. That meant they were tech-aware. She had maybe 20 minutes before they realized they were being watched, and she needed something to hit before that window slammed shut, pulling her wet scarf tighter. She scanned the compound layout she'd memorized from the aerial images. If she could infiltrate the north side, where the terrain dipped into an old mining tunnel, she could slip inside unseen. The entrance had been sealed once, but time had eaten away at the concrete. All she needed was a crack, and she had explosives to make one. As she reached the site, the ground beneath her feet shifted. A worn path, barely visible in the undergrowth, led toward a collapsed shaft. The old mining rig jutted upward like the skeleton of a dying beast. She pressed her hand against the outer wall, then ran her fingers along the edge. Cracked concrete. Perfect. She unpacked a small disc from her pouch, an adhesive microcharge, barely enough to kill, but strong enough to blow open rock. She set it, stepped back, and detonated with a silent pressure switch. The wall gave with a dull rumble, dust clouding her goggles. She slipped inside fast. Dark, tight, air thick with mold. She clicked on her infrared lens and began moving down the corridor, stepping over collapsed beams and twisted rebar. Rats skittered through the debris. Somewhere above, heavy boots thudded faintly. Patrols. She emerged behind a rusted vent grate and looked through. One of the storage rooms half filled with ammo crates and boxes of comms gear. No guards, no cameras. She pulled the grate loose, crawled in, and shut it silently behind her. Her earpiece clicked. Wraith. This is SHADOW2. We're circling high 2 minutes from visual, but no breach unless confirmed. Eliza tapped once to acknowledge. She didn't need noise. She needed proof. She moved through the storage room, scanning serial numbers on the crates, NSA tags, Navy shipment codes, and then a set of hard cases fiber-wrapped, sealed, and marked on it. That wasn't just gear. That was infrastructure. On it was a top-secret satellite uplink grid designed to manage unmanned weapons platforms. Whoever controlled these cases could reroute drone strikes, black out military airspace, or feed false data to missile defense systems. They weren't just stealing weapons. They were preparing for war. Footsteps approached. Eliza ducked behind a column of crates just as a guard entered, humming, rifle dangling lazily. He moved to a panel, checked a reading, and turned away. She stepped out and wrapped her arm around his throat, dragging him into the shadows. He struggled briefly, then went limp. She dragged him behind the gear and stripped his vest and rifle, replacing her outer jacket with his to blend in. A door opened nearby, automatic, sliding. Voices echoed. Kruger, you're telling me the satellites are already responding? Test pulse went through 10 minutes ago, Voss replied. We can reroute to attack drones in 20 seconds. If this works, we can reroute 50. Hell, we can turn entire war games inside out. Kruger laughed. And no one will know it was us. Eliza will, Voss said. She's here. Kruger hesitated. You sure? I saw the drone. Military. Precision route. She's only ever 12 steps behind, and we're only alive because she lets us be. She let Jensen live. Maybe she's gone soft. Voss chuckled coldly. No, Cole was bait. She's never soft. She's the storm after the trap's been sprung. Eliza pressed against the wall, heart calm, pulse steady. They knew she was close. That meant they'd tighten the net. She moved fast, ducking into the hall, following the shadows. Her stolen vest bought her enough time to pass through one checkpoint and slip into the central monitoring room. It was empty, but full of screens, dozens of live feeds, jungle approaches, satellite sweeps, digital overlays showing movement patterns of nearby patrols. She reached the console and connected a microrecorder to the primary CPU. She didn't need to destroy it. She just needed everything copied and transmitted. The drive blinked green. Upload complete. She keyed her mic. Shadow 2. This is Wraith. Confirm rogue satellite access. We're only compromised. I'm transmitting all data. Light up the sky in 5 minutes. Over. She shut the mic, pulled her hood low, and planted a final charge on the desk. As she turned, the door opened. Voss stood there. No surprise in her eyes. Eliza, she said softly. I told them you'd come. I never missed the finale. Eliza replied. You can't stop this. I don't have to, she said, backing toward the hall. I just have to light the match. Voss's eyes widened just as the flash. Charge went off. Blinding light. Screaming alarm. Eliza ran. Gunfire erupted behind her. Doors burst open. Guards swarmed. But she was already gone, slipping back through the vent tunnel. Retracing her steps in the dark, she emerged into the jungle just as the first missile tore through the compound. The sky above glowed orange. Screams, chaos, heat, and flame. The forest shook under the shockwave. Eliza didn't stop. She vanished into the jungle mist as helicopters roared overhead. One step ahead of the storm she had unleashed. The fire behind her raged like a furnace. Eliza didn't look back. Through the vines and mist, she sprinted with deliberate control, ducking beneath fallen branches and skimming through terrain that would have broken a less trained operative. Her mission wasn't done, not yet. The data she'd sent from the control room was only half the story. It proved the rogue team had hijacked her on it, but it didn't explain why. And in Eliza's world, the why was the most dangerous detail to leave behind. 2 minutes later, a black Tau chopper descended near a clearing she had designated as Point Viper. The rotor wash kicked up debris as Shadow to lean out the open door. Extraction complete. He yelled. Eliza shook her head. Negative. I need another insertion downtown Charleston. I have to meet someone. The pilot turned back, confused. Charleston, that's 2 hours east. We'll need clearance. No clearance, Eliza said, strapping in beside him. You'll drop me 10 clicks out. I'll make the rest on foot, Mom. We don't have orders for that. She looked at him flatly. I just neutralized a rogue satellite hijack. This is the order. The soldier didn't argue again. By dawn, Eliza was off-grid. walking the industrial outskirts of Charleston in civilian clothes, a duffel bag over her shoulder. She passed cargo yards and train cars, slipping between shadows until she reached a rundown marina near the river. An old fishing shack stood crooked at the edge of the dock. Inside was a man named Marcus Ridley, former NSA cryptologist turned whistleblower. He was the one who had sent the first warning buried in encrypted weather data. Only Eliza had known to look for it. She knocked twice, then paused, knocked once more. The door opened a crack. Eliza. His voice was barely audible. She stepped inside quickly. You were right, she said. Voss wasn't working alone. They've gone operational. Ridley swallowed hard. He hadn't left this place in weeks. His laptop sat on a table, screens showing coded sequences, static bursts, and overlays of satellite pings. They're planning a full disruption protocol, he said. Not just targeting weapons, infrastructure, power grids, hospitals, dams. Why? Because they believe the country is about to collapse under its own weight, and they want to push it. Liza's jaw tightened, a self-fulfilling prophecy. Ridley turned the screen. They're calling it Operation Dry Dawn, scheduled to begin in 72 hours. She leaned in. A list of targets filled the screen. Substations in Texas, water control valves in Arizona, flight systems in Atlanta, even control towers in California. The plan was chaos. If all this triggered at once, the U.S. would paralyze. They'll blame it on foreign cyber terror, Ridley said. While they rise from the ashes, Eliza stood. I need every file, every location, and a master key to stop it. That's the problem, Ridley replied, motioning to the map. The key isn't digital. It's biometric coded to one person. Eliza's brow furrowed. Who? He looked at her gravely. You. The room fell silent. Explain, she said. They cloned your command profile 3 years ago during a covert op in Lithuania. While you thought you were recovering a stolen prototype, they were copying your heartbeat pattern, retinal matrix, and voice command data. Your clearance level is the only one that can disarm the entire system. They needed you alive to make it work. Eliza's mind raced. That's why they didn't kill Cole. That's why Voss let me escape. I wasn't a threat, I was the final piece. Ridley nodded. They'll trigger it once you're close enough for the system to lock on. And once that happens, they won't need me anymore, she finished. He looked at her. You can still stop them, but if you enter the system, they'll try to use you. I won't let them, she said. 6 hours later, Eliza stood aboard her old boat, the Longview. It had seen storms, missions, sabotage, and recovery, but it had never failed her. Docked now on the outer edge of federal waters, she prepped her gear, not just weapons but dampers, scramblers, shortwave jammers. A Coast Guard cutter suddenly appeared on the horizon, slicing through waves like a steel predator. Eliza narrowed her eyes. No ordinary patrol. They were early. She calmly opened the hatch, stepping onto the deck as they pulled alongside. Boat owner, stand down and prepare for boarding. A voice barked through a megaphone. 3 armed men climbed aboard, rifles up. You're in restricted waters, one said. Name. Eliza didn't speak. She slowly removed her jacket, revealing the black badge clipped to her chest. The lead officer froze. Ma'am, I apologize. We didn't expect. She cut him off. I need your comms access, full sonar map, and radar blackout. Now, the team stepped back. The commander stammered. Under what authority? She handed him a tablet. It displayed her Special Forces ID, overlaid with a directive marked Presidential Eyes Only. He swallowed. Understood. Within minutes, her boat had gone dark to all scans. The cutter backed away. Eliza turned toward open sea. There was a facility hidden on an island 15 miles east of Charleston, a Cold War bunker once decommissioned, now very much alive. It was the last node in the Dry Dawn network. She wasn't going to knock dot, she was going to end it. Eliza Kane leaned into the throttle. The Longview cut across the Atlantic waters like a blade, its hull pounding the waves as the hidden island loomed ahead. From a distance, it looked like nothing, just another scrap of forgotten Cold War detritus. But satellite intel and Ridley's decrypted files told a different story. Below ground, the facility was humming with activity. The final node of Operation Dry Dawn lay beneath its soil, and if she didn't disable it now, the country would begin to tear itself apart within 72 hours, maybe less. As she neared the shore, the clouds above shifted darkly. She anchored in a quiet inlet, slipped into a wetsuit, and slid into the water. The cold bit through the neoprene, but she barely noticed. Her heart was steady, her mind locked in. She swam with the tide toward a jagged cove on the northern edge of the island. There, behind a curtain of rocks, was a vented grate that led into the substructure. Ridley's layout showed it fed directly into the geothermal power chamber. Perfect. She pulled herself into the tunnel, disabling the motion sensors with a portable scrambler. The crawl space was narrow, reeking of rust and algae. She moved inch by inch, her mind retracing the file. 3 levels, 1 core server vault. To human target stat Commander Drew Halpern and weapons engineer Tori Varn. Halpern had once been her training officer at Fort Bragg. Varn was supposed to be dead. Both were here. Both were part of Dry Dawn. Eliza reached the inner shaft, dropped silently onto a steel catwalk, and adjusted her sidearm. Below, turbines roared. Light pulsed from rows of quantum servers. No guards. They were overconfident. She moved quickly, through service corridors until voices echoed. "She's coming," a man said. Halpern. "We already have her biometric signal," Varn replied. "She's doing exactly what we need. Once she reaches the vault, the AI will extract her data live and initiate the cascade." Eliza kept moving. Her comms were dark. No backup. No escape plan. She had only herself and a dead man's override. Code burned into her memory. She entered the core hallway. Security lasers flared across it, blinking in a pattern. She timed her breath and stepped between them, avoiding contact. Then she reached a steel door stamped with red lettering, restricted. Bioskin required. She stood still. Let the scanner ping her heartbeat, map her eyes, read her gait. The door unlocked. Halpern stood inside. "Hello, Lieutenant Kane." She didn't raise her weapon yet. "You're making a mistake." "No," he said calmly. "We're correcting. 1. America's broken. You and I both know it. Dry Dawn is the reset it needs. You're going to kill millions. We're going to rebuild something better. And that's why you needed me, because you're too much of a coward to flip the switch yourself." His eyes narrowed. "That's what makes you predictable," Eliza said. "You still believe you're the hero." Varn stepped from the shadows, holding a tablet connected directly to the server interface. "I just need her to stand there 5 more seconds," she said. Eliza raised her gun and fired. The tablet shattered in Varn's hand. Sparks burst. She screamed and dropped to the floor. Halpern lunged. Eliza sidestepped and slammed him into the panel, pressing the blade to his throat. "Override code, Zulu's Ray 9 Foxtrot," she said. The core flashed. AI recognition shut down. Halpern tried to move, but she twisted his wrist and sent him to his knees. "You were never in control," she told him. "This was never your revolution. It was a suicide cult with keyboards." Behind her, Varn coughed, dragging herself away. "No signal means no detonation," Eliza continued. "And the backups? Already disabled." "You think this ends with U.S.?" Halpern said, blood in his teeth. "No," Eliza replied, "but it begins with you." She slammed his head against the steel and handcuffed him to a pipe. Alarms blared. The emergency power grid collapsed as she planted the thermal charges along the main server stacks. 30 seconds later, the island began to shake. She emerged onto the surface just as flames erupted from the ground. Plumes of black smoke rose into the clouds. A Black Ops VTOL descended, summoned by her emergency beacon. As the ramp lowered, Shadow greeted her. "Target secured." "Yes," she said, climbing aboard. "Facilities gone. Data's fried. Operation Dry Dawn is dead." "Who gave them the funding?" the soldier asked. "We'll find out," she said, "but they won't expect what's coming next." The ramp closed behind her. That evening, Eliza stood in a hidden briefing room in D.C., eyes locked with 2 figures, one from the Pentagon, one from Homeland. She handed over a drive. "This contains a list of names, funders, sympathizers, agents. Most are embedded deep in national networks. You'll need to move quietly, and you," the woman from Homeland asked. Eliza looked at the map behind them. Dozens of red dots blinked softly. "I'm going hunting." On the far end of the world, in a villa beneath flickering chandeliers, a man sipped wine as a screen showed images of Charleston. He paused as a notification appeared. "Node, Cambio Sig lost. Dry Dawn override triggered. Mission failed." He didn't react. "She's alive," he said. Then he smiled. "It begins again." Eliza Kane moved through the streets of Istanbul with practiced calm. The city teemed with sound vendors shouting, trams screeching, horns echoing through narrow corridors. It was the kind of chaos that made people invisible, perfect for hunting. The final name on her list was here. She didn't know what he looked like anymore. Plastic surgeons had made sure of that, but she knew his gait, his habits, and his shadow. His real name was Saul Mercer. The government once called him an asset. Now, they called him an international ghost. She turned into a spice shop and greeted the old man behind the counter in Turkish. He gave a nod, then motioned to a narrow back stair. She descended into darkness, past crates of dried saffron and hidden antennae broadcasting encrypted signals. At the bottom, a heavy steel door slid open. Inside sat a one-eyed analyst in front of 8 screens. "You're late," he muttered. "I'm precise." She replied. He tapped a key. One monitor flickered and revealed satellite footage. A figure stepped from a black car in the car key district, surrounded by nondescript bodyguards. Mercer's running with Russian security, the analyst said. His route's tight. Never spends more than 2 minutes in the open. I only need 60 seconds. That night, under a moonless sky, Eliza positioned herself above a coffee house with line of sight on the target's exit route. She carried no sniper rifle, no backup, just a small EMP device, a silenced handgun, and a drive containing all the evidence linking Mercer to the failed Dry Dawn coup. Her orders were clear: retrieve if possible, eliminate if necessary. Mercer appeared at exactly 20 to 13, as expected, clean-shaven, thinner than the man she once knew, but unmistakable in posture. As his convoy passed, Eliza tossed the MP unit. A sharp pulse rang out, invisible but potent. The SUV stalled mid-turn. Bodyguards scrambled, drawing weapons. She was already on the move. She dropped down the side of the building, landed between two trash bins, and slid into the chaos. Mercer ducked into an alley. She followed. "You're not as hard to find as you think," she said from the shadows. He turned. Recognition flickered. Then came the smirk. "Eliza Kane, still doing Washington's dirty work?" "No," she said, "just cleaning up the parts they're too scared to touch. You don't understand what Dry Dawn was meant to be." "I understand exactly," she said, stepping forward, "and I've seen what it nearly became. A world where men like you rewrite history with a keyboard and an explosive vest." He tried to reach for a pistol. She shot him cleanly in the leg. He dropped to the ground with a grunt. "I need the fail-safe key," she said. "Where is it?" "You already destroyed the mainframe." He groaned. "Not the satellite link you buried in Malta." "I want the key." Mercer laughed. "You kill me, the link dies with me." "No," she said. "I extract it and walk away, or I leave you here for the Russians to find. They're not as forgiving as I am." He spat blood. "Vault, Karadak, Street, Black Door, codes 88,613. She walked away without looking back. A signal burst from her comms. A black ops van scooped up Mercer 10 minutes later. 3 days later, Eliza stood in a private facility beneath Quantico. The final node was disabled. Dry Dawn was fully dismantled. For now, as she debriefed with the task force commander, a junior officer handed her a small, sealed envelope. Inside was a photo, an old one. A group of Tier 1 operators back in Afghanistan, faces younger, cleaner. One of them was Mercer. "Who gave him the seed funding?" she asked. The commander hesitated. "Off-book project. Preceded your unit. Designed for domestic resets in case of internal collapse. Mercer went rogue with it. And the funders, high level. Hidden even from us. Then I'm not done." She walked out into the open air as the sun set behind the Virginia trees. For a moment, she let the wind hit her face. The mission had cost her years, friends, blood. But she wasn't bitter. She had known this path long before she was ever handed an operator's badge. She boarded her boat again that night. The Longview waited in the quiet harbor, untouched, refueled. As she untied the ropes, a young Coast Guard lieutenant approached. With a salute, "You really going back out there alone?" "I was never not alone," she said. He handed her a sealed case. "What is it?" she asked. "From the secretary. Says it's for your eyes only." She opened it once she was on the water. Inside was a list. Not of targets, but of watchers. Men and women embedded in key positions: media, tech, defense, commerce. The architects behind the architects. They didn't just plan Dry Dawn. They planned its successor. At the bottom of the file was a message. "We're in position. Say the word." Eliza set the folder down, increased the throttle, and headed back toward open sea. She didn't know if she would survive this next phase. But she did know this. As long as people tried to shape the world through control, coercion, and shadow, she would be there. Not as a soldier, not as a spy. As a ghost. And ghosts never rest. End of story.